The Curta is a 4-function calculator: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We already did the first 3, so let's try division. It's basically long division, but every step has to be done using only additions or subtractions. The standard long division procedure involves doing a bunch of little divisions digit by digit. So let's start with a really simple one like 45 divided by 9. You need to start with 45 on the answer digits, so I'm just going to add 45 to get started. Now, how many times does 9 go into 45? We can just subtract 9 over and over until it goes down to 0. So I put 9 on the input, pop over to subtraction mode, and I start cranking.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so 45 divided by 9 is 5. Now, I was counting the cranks out loud, but the Curta has a counter in it. But in subtraction mode, the counter counts down. That's so that you can use subtraction to undo an addition. Now, when I'm dividing, really I want the counter to go up, even though you're subtracting. And that, my friends, is the purpose of this switch, the only interface feature that I haven't told you about yet. They call this the reversing lever. Up is the normal position. This makes the counter go up every time you add and down every time you subtract. In the down position, the counter goes down every time you add and up every time you subtract. It's the reverse. The arrows here are trying to indicate this. On top, both arrows are going the same direction, so adding answers adds to the counter and subtracting answers subtracts from the counter. But in the bottom position, subtracting answers adds to the counter, so the arrows are pointing in the opposite directions. I guess the icons here make sense if you already know what they mean. So anyway, to do a division like this, I put 42 in the answer, clear the counter, switch to reverse counting, subtract 7 until it goes down to 0. And now you can see the counter says 6, which is the answer. What if the number doesn't go in evenly, like 45 divided by 7? That looks like this. Now here I had to just stop when I see 3 in the answers, because I'm going to overshoot if I subtract 7 again. So the answer is 6 with a remainder of 3. This business of watching carefully and stopping before you go too far is kind of annoying. It's actually easier to just keep going until it does go too far. It's obvious when that happens because the answer digits all spin back to 9s. So when that happens, it means I did it once too many times, so I can just pop back to addition mode and add 1 back in. This is actually pretty easy to do, even for complicated divisions. Check out this one. You put the big number in the answer, subtract the other one until it underflows, and then add it once back in. Now this is all dividing when the answer is just a single digit. If you want a quotient with multiple digits, you got to do it like in the long division. You divide in each digit starting on the left, and after each digit is done, you get a big remainder. Usually people don't write it this way, and you probably don't think about it like this, but this big number is the remainder after the first digit, and then you move on to the next digit and divide that to get a new remainder. On the Curta, you do exactly the same thing. You start on the digit all the way to the left, subtract until you underflow, then add 1 back in. Now this is the first remainder. And then shift the digit to the right by 1 spot and subtract again. You keep on doing this until you eat up the whole number, and the answer shows as usual on the counter. Hey, let's try this one. Everybody loves 22 over 7. Here's a cute trick. If you enter the input as far left as possible, it's as if you're doing this number instead, so you get lots of decimal digits in the answer. Right on. All of those times I was just dividing by a single digit, but that's not necessary. Here's a big one. It's pretty satisfying to make it all happen. In some ways, this is even easier than multiplication. When you're multiplying, each digit position gets a certain number of cranks that you just have to remember, or you input them as you go. But for a division, you enter all the numbers at the beginning, and then you just start cranking. You don't need to keep track or remember anything as you're doing it. Oddly enough, this long division process highlights one of the only design choices that they made for the Curta, where they skimped on a feature that was common in other machines. You still need to pay attention closely to notice when there's an underflow. Like if you subtracted too far, then you got to add 1 back in. A typical desktop calculator will ding a bell when that happens. It's a usability feature to give you a little extra feedback when it's time to move to the next digit. But on the Curta, no ding! I actually haven't seen any writing about why the bell wasn't included. I'm sure that Curt considered it, but I doubt you could miniaturize a bell to make it fit in there and still function. Maybe you could make like a loud clicking sound or a purely haptic feedback of some sort. But I guess Curt decided either it wasn't necessary or it couldn't be done well. So you just have to watch carefully. The long division process is easy to do, but I find I mess it up a lot. I guess I would get better with practice, but I often forget to pop between addition and subtraction at each step, or sometimes I overshoot the crank and I end up going around an extra time. The crank can't turn backwards, so if you overshoot by a little bit, you have to just keep going all the way around. In my opinion, this may be the weakest part of the Curta's design. The only time when I feel like I wish it worked a little bit differently. It would be a lot more usable if I was able to unwind a partial crank and get back to where I started. But really, this is more of a nuisance than anything. If you ever do add an extra time, you can always just pop to subtraction and immediately undo it. And if you subtract an extra time, you can switch it to addition to undo it. Maybe this sounds complicated, but actually it works fine in practice. So watch carefully and try not to mess it up, but if you do mess it up, it's no big deal. I do kind of miss that ding though.